Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our webinar with Katie Anderson. And before we get started with the webinar, I want to introduce the Lean Construction blog and tell you a little bit about ourselves. Okay, so this is part of the Lean Construction blog's series. And give me 1 second. Let me move this down here. Maybe it's better. Okay. This is part of the Lean Construction blog's webinar series. And the Lean Construction blog was started by my co-founder, Navi, and I. And we started this about 6 years ago. And our goal is to make knowledge about Lean Construction accessible to the industry so that more people can apply and use Lean methods to transform the way they do work and transform the industry. So if you're new to the Lean Construction blog, we'd like to share with you some stats that we have so far. So currently we have about 300 plus thousand unique visitors to the blog. Every year we get between 100 and 200,000 unique visitors. And we've reached more than 800,000 page views from almost every single country. There's 2 more countries that haven't participated, but we'll get those soon. And so far we have more than 150 blog posts, more than 25 webinars, and contribution from more than 100 authors. We've hosted 2 conferences so far, and this year we're going to host 2 more virtual conferences to kind of invigorate the industry. So if you're interested in Lean Construction and in the blog, please help share the word. We're trying to create a movement here, and our goal is to reach 1 million people throughout the world and help make the knowledge accessible for people to apply Lean throughout their projects. This is not our only webinar this year. So what we are doing this year is that we have 12 webinars. We have one each month with a Lean practitioner and an expert. And in doing so, we hope that you join us for our upcoming webinars as well as this webinar, because we want to create the live debate and live conversations. The next webinar we have is going to be with Dean Reed on June 30th on creating Lean, not implementing it. So Dean's been applying Lean for more than 24 years. And he has a very deep insight in understanding about what it takes to really get the best out of your Lean application. We also have a webinar on July 28th with Dave McKay. And Dave is a consultant that has been working in Lean construction for more than a decade, and he has a lot of really good practical field experience. So those are our upcoming webinars. I hope you guys join us, and we'll have more coming up as well. In terms of the blog, we do have 2 virtual conferences coming up. The European Lean Construction Conference, that's going to happen in June 9th and 10th. And then we have the Lean in the Field Conference in September. The European Lean Construction Conference is really a conference to unite the Lean practitioners throughout Europe so that people can share stories, best practices, and learn how to implement Lean throughout Europe. Because Europe has a lot of diversity in terms of cultures, in terms of nationalities, in terms of languages, in terms of ways that people approach Lean. And we want to create a place where people can come together and share stories so they can improve together. And then Lean in the Field Conference is really the first conference that we've created. And this is the 2nd year that we're doing this. And the Lean in the Field Conference is a place where people who work in the field, which is 89% of people in the construction industry, such as project engineers, superintendents, foremen, project managers, can come and learn practical knowledge about how to apply Lean in their projects, whether it's how to do a daily huddle, visual management, how to get buy-in from the team, and how to create diversity and inclusion on your projects. These 2 conferences will be virtual, so anybody can join, and they'll happen over a 2-day span. And we have a conference platform. So if you've attended one of our conferences in the past, I highly recommend that you join us again in the future. And before we go start the webinar, I want to thank our sponsor for the blog, Bosch Refine My Site. They're a collaboration platform that is based on the Last Planner system, and they have a very easy to use and very low-cost solution that helps companies apply a last learning system on their projects. And they've been kind enough to sponsor the blog and the webinar series. And I'm going to play a short video from them before we get started.
Refine My Site, in my opinion, is the best, leanest tool on the market for last planning system.
Okay, well, thank you, Basha, for my site. I think Raphael and his team are here as well, so you guys can talk to Raphael if you have any questions about how the software works. So today I'm happy to introduce Katie Anderson. So Katie is a lean consultant, coach, author, and speaker, and she's been practicing lean for more than 20 years. She has a annual Japanese trip that she takes people to Japan to experience the culture. I've lived in Japan for about a year myself, and the culture in Japan is very unique. It's something that you have to be immersed there in order to understand and see the difference. And then Katie has a upcoming book that she's going to talk about, and she has a lot of wonderful resources on lean, and she has a really good insight on continuous improvement and transformation. And Katie's been worked on a variety of industries, including manufacturing, construction, healthcare, startups. So she has a breadth of different experiences. And today she's going to talk about her book, 3 Leadership Practices to Create a People-Centered Culture of Learning. So Katie, I'm going to turn it over to you, and go ahead and share your screen. Katie, you need to unmute yourself.
Yep. Sorry, I had it on mute there. If you stop sharing yours, then I'll be able to share mine.
Oh, okay. Let me stop mine.
Hi, everyone. Great to be here. I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I already know some familiar names and faces that I've seen here. So thanks for joining me here today. I will share my screen now. Where did it go? Here we go. So today, what I find the most valuable out of doing these live events is the opportunity to connect and engage. So I'm going to have a brief presentation, some opportunities for you to share some comments in the chat, and then we'll be opening it up to questions and comments and dialogue. And that's what gives me the most energy, and hopefully gives you the most energy as well. So thank you for inviting me here today. And thank you for Dawn for the nice introduction. My book actually has been out since July of last year, and it's available in paperback and in ebook as well on Amazon. And I'm excited. I just finished recording the audiobook with my fancy microphone here, and that'll be coming out on the book's 1-year anniversary in July. So I'm thrilled about that. A little history of me. For me, I never, if you asked me when I graduated from college what I'd be doing, I wouldn't have been able to articulate or name what I'm doing now as a leadership coach, process improvement, and Japan study trip leader. But everything that I have done is really connected about learning, helping other people, and connecting together around the world. Little fact about me, I've lived in 6 countries outside of the United States. In particular, I lived in London after university and in Australia for 4.5 years where I got my master's degree. and then most recently in Japan in 2015 and 16. And I'm going to share a bunch of stories about that. My intention today is to really share a lot of stories and some concepts, and then leave you with 3 tangible practices that you can start bringing into your life immediately to become a more intentional, people-centered leader. And this word intention is is foundational to my purpose in life, which is about inspiring people around the world to live and lead with intention. And we'll dive into what that word means to me. So before we get started, this is our first opportunity for using the chat here. I want you to set your intention for how you intend to show up and engage for the next, hour and 15 minutes that we have together. And it's okay to please be honest about where you're at, but taking a moment to pause and set an intention helps you then align your actions with how you want to be and show up. So please put in the chat for yourself about how engaged do you intend to be together today. Thanks. All right. So I'm going to tell some stories and unwind a little bit. This is actually a picture from 2015, April, so just over 6 years ago, which is unbelievable to me. This is my husband, John, on the right, and then Mr. Isao Yoshino, who's now the subject of my book. He's currently 77 years old and lives outside of Toyota City in Japan, and was a Toyota leader and executive, or he finished his career as a Toyota executive. He was there for 40 years. And this was what I thought was going to be a once in a lifetime opportunity to meet with this amazing Toyota leader and have this incredible experience to go see the manufacturing floor of one of Toyota's plants. But before I dive into this story, I actually want to unwind a little bit about how I even got to this place. As I mentioned, I started off my career maybe I didn't mention this, in academia, in healthcare, health policy research. I worked in universities for many years conducting research, and that's what led me to Australia for my master's degree. And what I loved about academia was the focus on learning and connecting and sharing ideas. However, what was missing for me was a lot more human interaction and feeling like what I was doing was having a tangible impact on people's lives and outcomes. I was doing a lot of historical research. So I transitioned into more of a consulting role, first in Australia, and then I started my real lean practitioner practice when I joined Stanford Children's Hospital. That was not 20 years ago. That was more like 15 years ago. And I loved the concepts within the lean principles about engaging people who do the work, who are closest to the work in problem solving. However, at that time, I also over the 6 years I was at Stanford Children's, came to realize that how I was showing up as sort of an expert who had been trained in research, and I was trained as a great problem solver, and me showing up that way was actually not serving me anymore when I was more in a people development role. So moving into leadership roles where I had a team, as well as an internal consulting position where I was supposed to be leading by influence and helping other people solve the problems that they had responsibility for. And it was during that time that I really started to make a shift for myself and had some recognition that I needed to change how I was showing up to be more in line with my purpose and intention, so that I could help fulfill my real role, which was to help other people solve problems. So that will be the arc that we come back to at the end as we dive into sort of a leader's role or your role as a people developer, and how you can be more effective with that while still owning your own expertise. And then after some other and also I had some great experiences while I was at the Children's Hospital, working with redesigning the new hospital facility, which was out there. And so for 2 years was working with our designers and the construction companies to really think about how we're going to build and create this new hospital. So that was really exciting for me to see how we could apply those same lean principles into design and build for a new facility. And so that was eye-opening for me as well. So now fast forward back to this picture here in 2015. And this one day that I thought was going to be a once in a lifetime opportunity turned out to be the beginning of what has become one of the most important relationships in my adult life with Mr. Yoshino, and how much I have learned from him about leadership, about learning, and our shared experiences of I guess being across cultures and generations and genders, but how we can learn and help each other grow no matter what place we are in our lives. So this was my last time in Japan. Here, this next picture, which was in January of last year. I thought that the book was about to come out. I thought I was going to see Mr. Yoshino 4 more times, twice more in Japan for my Japan study trips, once in Europe and once in the US. I was going to bring him out to do a bunch of engagements with us here in the Bay Area and across the US. But alas, as we know, 2020 didn't happen as we all predicted. But this is us last week, and we've pivoted to still talking and teaching and collaborating together. And Mr. Yoshino is a really interesting person. If you haven't had a chance to hear him or read my book, he was at Toyota at some really important inflection points in Toyota's arc of becoming the organization that it's renowned for what we call lean, really the origins of the Toyota way and the Toyota production system, and that it didn't happen by magic. It happened with great intention and purposeful practice from leaders at all levels. And Mr. Yoshino helped solidify some of these leadership behaviors and actions through different roles that he happened to, with serendipity, have the opportunity to be part of. He was working in an internal consulting role for the senior executive team in the late 1970s, and then had an opportunity to help with Toyota's expansion into the global market. So more stories to come. But back to this word intention, and why is it so important to me? A little kanji history here, that the 2 symbols in Japanese that make up the word intention in Japanese, shiko, this bottom part means heart, and this one on the right here means direction. And I've really come to take this to mean that intention is not just about having an idea that was something we want to do, but it's about how do we take action? How do we connect with what's really important to us? Who do we want to be? Our values, how we define ourselves, and then what actions do we need to take to really fulfill that purpose, to be that person we want to be. So intention is not just a concept, it's about taking action as well. And then there's some difference between intentions and goals. So I see intention, again, is more connected with our heart, who we want to be inside, how we define ourselves. Whereas goals, while very important as well, are more external. What do we want to achieve for ourselves, for our teams, for our organization? So how do we connect both of those together? And then a Japanese saying that's really foundational to me, which is, it's a proverb: fall down 7 times, get up 8. And it's about having the perseverance and patience to continue towards a goal, continue towards who we want to be, knowing that we're going to fall down, we're going to stumble, that we are imperfect, but it's how do we get up and keep going. And these dolls from Japan are called Daruma dolls. And this is a very big one. I have a lot of little ones that I give out often. They're weighted at the bottom, and it's hard to see on my hand, but they actually right themselves back up. So if it's about falling down and coming right back up. And when you have a goal, you fill in the Daruma's eye. And then when you achieve your goal or your intention, you fill in the Daruma's other eye. So just like this Daruma here. So really, who do you want to be? How do you want to show up? What are your goals? And how do you keep learning your way forward? And in a moment, now we're going to dive into some of the stories within my book and as it relates to lean practices and how we can show up with more intention to be a people-centered leader and coach in our organizations. But first, I want us to take a pause and practice what I call hansei, or not what I call hansei. The word hansei in Japanese means self-reflection. And so taking pauses to reflect and process information, to take a pause to reflect with how we want to be and how we want to show up is so important. So take a pause for a moment and reflect. For this last section, what was one takeaway or reflection that you have, and put that into the chat. Don't be shy. There you go. Never give up. Great. Thanks, Margaret. Be more intentional on a daily basis. Great. Um, career work and intention. Everything's intent. Rise up to 8. That's great. Yeah. So take this moment and reflect for yourself and share. Thank you. Purposeful practice. Great. All right. So now on to this book that I never thought 6 years ago that would be something that I had written, but this is where you, when you have an experience and you want to share it with other people, how something, a new goal can be created. So to unwind again back to those first moments when I was first meeting with Mr. Yoshino, I was really curious as a lean practitioner who had been practicing for over a decade at that time, to really dive into the origins of the Japanese way of doing business, the Toyota way of doing business, and really understanding what was the secret of Toyota. And Mr. Yoshino, I would ask him all the time, what's a secret sauce? And maybe not use those words, but he would say, there is no secret. There's no secret. And then one day he said, actually, maybe the only secret is Toyota's attitude towards learning. I want you to hold that for a moment too. If you think about, we have so many tools and processes and ways to do things, but at the end of the day, it is all about how can we learn more effectively. So tools are only as effective as they're helping us move forward, and that we're seeing that as a learning process for continuous improvement. How do we make things visible? How do we move forward? How do we engage other people? And so this attitude towards learning is actually connected to everything that they do, and is one of the, I think one of the things that often we have missed in translating lean concepts is that we look at sort of the external artifacts or the outcomes, but not really seeing that it is those internal processes around learning, reflecting, and moving forward. And the process, the part of writing this book was so incredible with Mr. Yoshino is that we partnered for, well, many years, but with intentional purpose towards creating a book together that through our partnership and me asking questions and trying to put together all the stories of, 4 decades of learning and leading, is that he had an opportunity to reflect and learn more deeply and see things from a different perspective. And so if no one read the book, that would be just an invaluable experience for me to help him reflect and learn more on his life. And yet I'm so grateful that he's been able to share those experiences and stories with us so that we can learn as well. So how did this all get started? 6 months before we moved to Japan, and this was for my husband's job, by the way. So after Stanford Children's, I moved to another large healthcare system in California, was leading a huge team of internal consultants, process improvement coaches, and then started my own consulting practice and had a baby number 2. And 3 months after we had our second son, my husband said, I have an opportunity for us to move to Japan for work. And of course, I was like, oh my gosh, 3-month-old baby, but let's do it. And we moved when he was almost 10 months old. And what made me the most excited about going to Japan, not just for the opportunity to be immersed in the culture, is that I had met Mr. Yoshino at a conference 6 months earlier. And he totally blew away any of the preconceived notions that I had about, sort of stoic, harsh Japanese sensei taskmasters. He was very jovial and warm and humility up on the stage when he was talking with John Shook, who was at that time the head of the Lean Enterprise Institute. And John Shook was the first non-Japanese employee of Toyota Motor Corporation in the 1980s when Toyota was looking to expand and actually starting the NUMMI joint venture with General Motors here in the San Francisco Bay Area. And Mr. Yoshino said something on stage that struck me as really quite profound and has become the framework that I put forward for leadership now. That his is an offhand comment that he made, but this comes through with everything around that concept of having an attitude towards learning. So his aim as a manager was to develop John or whomever was reporting to him by giving him a mission or target and supporting him while he figured out how to reach that target. And then he was also aware at the same time he was developing himself. And so I think this really gets back to just the fundamentals of leadership, that it's about setting the direction, setting a challenge. Where do we need to go? Creating alignment, then providing the support for people to be creative and move in that direction and create the conditions for them to be successful. And first and foremost, developing ourselves, focusing on ourselves. How can we be more intentional and better as leaders to help fulfill both the direction setting and providing support? So what I'm going to do now is talk a little bit about both of these. So again, providing a challenge, a direction, or support, so important so that people know how to orient and align all of their activities. Like, where do we need to go? One of the biggest problems with sort of problem solving and strategic initiatives that I see in the organizations that I work with across industries is that when we're starting to define what a problem is, which is target minus actual equals a gap or a problem, people say, well, we spend a lot of time understanding the current condition, what's actually happening. But then when it comes to saying, well, what's the target? What should be happening? Or what's the challenge or goal that we need to be moving towards? Often people don't really have clarity on what that is. And that is really the leader's role. Where do we need to go? What should be happening? What needs to happen? And then we can really start defining what that process problem is and learn our way forward to that. Something that I have learned from Mr. Yoshino and is from my practices as well is that targets should be determined by what is needed, not what is just what is achievable. So that ultimate sort of challenge or that larger target needs to be about what our customers need, not what we think we can just achieve. Coming from healthcare, this was a big, I would be in board discussions or senior executive meetings about, well, what should our error rate be for this year? No, the error rate should be 0. Maybe we don't know how to get there yet. So we need to set some interim targets, but we need to be setting challenging targets that then help us move towards that ideal condition that we need. And the reason for this is, again, gets back to this connection towards an attitude towards learning, because when we set those challenging targets, it's about what we learn from the lessons of not reaching the target that helps us move forward, and we keep getting better and sort of moving towards there. If we only settle for things we know we can achieve, we're not really stretching ourselves, nor are we doing right for our customers and for our people as well. So then a leader's purpose, the second part is to provide support. And this is where this concept of being intentional is so important, because often it's easier for us to move from a place of like setting the direction, telling people what to do, but providing support actually means letting go and allowing other people to move forward and step into problem solving, step into ownership, and us to be moving more into a coaching role. And so we have to balance for ourselves this concept of setting a challenge and providing a challenge and pushing people with also providing the support. And if you have challenge with no support, you're going to have probably a pretty disengaged team, either if you're leading them through influence or you're a direct manager, feeling disengaged or like, oh my God, how are we going to get there? And if you have only support with no challenge or direction, then people they may feel like things are great, but all their energy is going in different directions, or may not be growing in the way that they need to. So how do we have challenge and support together? So a leader's role is about creating and supporting the structures and process for learning. So we can never make other people learn. We can't make them improve, but we can create the conditions that allow them to learn and develop and to grow. And, this is at home as well. It's not, as parents, I liken this to our role as parents as well. We create the conditions for our children to learn. At work, we create the conditions for our colleagues to learn as well. And it's the process of learning, not just the outcome that we need to achieve for the business, that is really important. So then again, this comes back to the attitude towards learning. Sometimes we get so outcome focused that we're only looking at, did we meet the goal or not, but not looking at the process to get there. And the people development side is so important as well if we really want to be accelerating and creating innovation in our organizations. And so we have to give spaces for people to fail and explore ideas and not see everything as a crisis or something urgent that has to be fixed now, but where are those places that we can allow people to learn, to fail, to experiment, so that they can learn to learn and then later learn to lead. There's this wonderful story that Mr. Yoshino told me, and it's in the book, just almost almost verbatim how he told it to me. It was one of our very first, one of the first stories he told me when we were sitting down with purpose for working on this book. And we were talking about his early career. And this ties into that leaders and managers have responsibility for creating conditions for success and take responsibility for when mistakes happen. And so he was 22 years old. He had just started at Toyota. He was going to have a back office job, but Toyota had a 3-month orientation program. 4 weeks of that was in the classroom, and then 2 months of that was actually putting these new grads who are going to be in the back office out on the front line of making cars. And so one of Mr. Yoshino's rotations was to go into the paint shop, and he was to mix 2 cans, one of solvent and one of paint, into a big vat, and it was going to spray out into on the cars as they're coming across the line. And he admitted it was got pretty boring at times. And one day, the shop floor manager ran up to the paint shop and said, the paint's not sticking to the cars, like 100 cars down the line, we're going to have to be repainted. And young Mr. Yoshino was like, uh-oh. He was really worried because he knew that it was obviously his mistake there. But instead of blaming him immediately, right, like, what did you do, or getting mad at him, the managers came over and asked him to show the process by which he had poured the solvent and the paint in the container. And when they saw that how easy it was to make a mistake because the cans looked very similar, they not only did not yell at him or blame him, they thanked him for making that mistake, because it made visible to them that they had not created working conditions for him to be successful, to do it right. He was new to that area, and the other workers who'd been there for a while knew more clearly. But for someone new, they needed to make it very clear and visible the differences between the paint and the solvent. So how do we create those conditions for people to be successful at work, to not make mistakes, and then to not blame them if they do make a mistake, and to instead see it as an opportunity to learn and improve the process? It's so important. I can't think of, I look back on all my working experience, and it's hard for me to think of that same outcome happening at any organization. Well-intended people, but we're so habituated for blaming people rather than looking at process. And again, it's about making the invisible visible. So it was hard to see those, how the differences of the cans were very similar. How do we make our thinking visible too? How do we make processes visible? And that's a lot, I know, of like the Last Planner and other tools that you use in the construction industry, and we use in other industries as well. How do we start making the things that are not easily seen more easily seen, so that we can all be on the same page and then know how we can improve and how we can collaborate most effectively? So making the invisible visible is critical. And then another important part of a leader's purpose, and I'd say is the most important, is starting with ourselves and developing ourselves at first. So developing others is a path to helping you develop yourself. And I really believe this too, because when we were rewarded in our, as students growing up and later in our careers for being the one who has the right answer, or for, heroically putting out a crisis or a fire in a crisis situation, or coming in with, we're told to have the right answer, or come in with deep content knowledge, being an expert. That is great. And there's times when our expertise, or us owning the problem, or being the one with the right answer, is really important. Yet as we grow as people and as leaders, and even as independent contributors working on a team, it's not just about us being right, but it's about helping others be right too. How do we collaborate together, and how do we draw on the knowledge of everyone? So that challenges us to show up in a very different way with intention. And I can call this learning to navigate the leadership continuums. We often think of things as this or that, but how can we shift to understanding that they're often more of a continuum that includes this and that? So it's not just, or coaching is not just telling versus asking. It's about telling and asking. It's not being an expert or a coach. It's not providing just challenge or support. And it's not just focusing on business outcomes at the expense of people development or people development at the expense of business outcomes. But how do we do all of these? And then how do we know how to be most effective in the moment based on the situation? And that is really the art of leadership, and what I call the learning to lead, and then leading to learn. Because learning is about knowing how to show up to help create this organization where people all are able to learn and move forward. And I love this quote for Mr. Yoshino too, that it's far better to know that we still have to improve than believe we know everything already. And once we stop learning for ourselves and stop focusing on how we can be better people ourselves, we've really lost the sort of the heart of the humanity for us. And so one way that I propose that we can focus on improving ourselves is to use the same scientific method that we are taught in the beginning, which is plan, do, check, act, or plan, do, study, act. But I propose that we flip it and make sure that we're starting with study. So study, adjust, plan, do, and continue the cycle from there. Because often we start with solutions. So we start planning with our idea of what, like, oh, we think we have this idea. Well, let's then like just execute on it. But we hadn't really understood the current condition, and we don't know what our target is. So we can apply this to ourselves as well. So study, what are our current habits? Who do I want to be? What's my intention? But then how am I actually showing up, and what might be a gap between who I want to be and the impact that my actions are actually having? So then what actions are better aligned with that? What are the things I need to practice? What experiments will I try? Then actually doing it, and then reflecting. And doing this even on a daily basis can be so, so powerful. And in one moment, I'm going to share with you what I consider 3 practices to help accelerate you on your own study, adjust, plan, do cycle. But before that, again, we're going to take a pause and practice some self-reflection, practice Hansei. What is one takeaway that you have from this section? Please put that in the chat. Great, starting to see some comments come in here. The best leaders create a culture where it's okay to fail. It's okay to make a mistake. Oh yeah, here. Never stop learning, developing each other, make the invisible visible. Oh, great. So do take a time to articulate this for yourself. Usually, when we take a pause, when we make it visible, that key learning for ourselves, it anchors it for us. So, oh, thanks. Someone likes the SAPD. I've recorded some videos recently on that. So if you go to my website, you can check out some of those. I love the SAPD too. Thank you. So seeing failures. So 3 practices to become a more effective people-centered leader. And these have been invaluable for me, and I'm excited to share them with you. So first and foremost, and this has been transformational for me, pay attention to the quality of your questions. So asking questions can be one of the best ways to help other people grow and develop and keep responsibility for problem solving with themselves. Yet oftentimes we think we are asking questions when really it's our idea with a question mark on it. So this funny looking animal is a wolf disguised as a sheep, because I challenge you to pay attention all day to what you say and other people say as well. But more often than not, we ask leading or prompting questions, which are really our idea or our perspective or our suggestion, just with a question mark on it. Have you thought about trying my idea? This is anything that's a closed-ended question that's asked with multiple choice. You're not really giving open inquiry to someone you're suggesting. So I encourage you to be aware of these fake questions. And if you have a suggestion for someone, label it. Say, I have a suggestion. Be honest with yourself that you're not really asking a question. Instead, if you're wanting to ask a question and really not be suggestive to someone else, think about how you can reframe your question as a genuine, open, what or how question that doesn't have an implied answer to it. So what have you tried so far? How How could you, what next steps could you take? How are you thinking about this? These could also be who else might have some information about this problem. It's not, instead of suggesting, sometimes then it is good to have a suggestion, but just be honest with yourself when you're like, you hear someone doesn't have an idea, you're like, oh, I have some knowledge here. Let me share it with you. I know Susie in the production planning department has some good information that could help you. So, it's not just asking questions. Again, it's knowing when to tell and when to ask. The second tip is about listening openly. And listening is not just about listening with open ears, which is very important. And these are drawings by my friend and coaching partner, Karen Ross. It's about seeing and listening with open eyes, seeing the whole person, what's actually happening. That's why on video can be so helpful, especially when we're remote. Listening with an open mind, not having our preconceived assumptions about what is happening or what's going on for the other person, and then listening with an open heart. So really going back to that human connection and hearing what's actually happening for someone. Are they frustrated? What's going on for them? And not just getting so focused on the outcome, but what really is their experience, because that helps us show up more effectively. And then the third is to take what I call an intention pause. So going back to the concept of what's my purpose, but it could be on the large level or even in the moment. What's my purpose or my role or my intention in this meeting, in this interaction? And then what are the actions I need to take to align with that? So we are running from meeting to meeting, from parenting to working, and taking even a 10-second pause to say, what's my role in this meeting? Am I here to tell? Am I here to ask? How do I need to show up? And just ground yourself with these micro moments of pause so that we can slow down and be more intentional about how we're showing up so that we're less reactive and more proactive. And then to remember that learning is never perfect and it's never complete. It's always this SAPD cycle, and to give ourselves permission for being imperfect and just connecting with the heart and leading with the heart and leading with a curiosity for learning, to get back to that concept of the only secret is an attitude towards learning. And again, to remember that reflection, studying, is the beginning.
Ciao.
Sorry, I got a little distracted there. Beginning and not the end of learning. So before we transition into, everyone's please themselves. Thank you. So if for everyone to set your intention here and share it in the chat as well, that what is one thing that you will practice with intention that you've learned today or reflected on today to become a more effective people-centered leader or coach with your people? So please share. Paying attention to the quality of questions, watch out for leading questions, ask better questions. Yeah, great. Listen more, present. Yeah, ask questions with intention. Great. Well, I'm excited to see that questions was a big thing. First, I want to share that I love to connect with people genuinely. Please reach out to me on LinkedIn or Twitter or send me a message. And I'm excited this morning, I'm announcing a new workshop that I'm leading 3 weeks from today, just on that topic of asking questions. And it's going to include a lot of practice and learning by doing. It's called Breaking the Telling Habit: How to Use Powerful Questions to Unlock Innovation and Amplify Engagement. And I'm offering a 20% early registration fee using the code here. And I'll drop in the actual direct link, or you can just visit my website, kbjanderson.com/academy. Of course, the book's available on Amazon, and the audiobook's coming out soon. And I have a new workbook as well that's a companion guide for that as well. And so I'd love to have you join me in the question workshop and just connect with me in general as well. So I will pop that in the chat, and then I will, we can open up to questions. So thank you, everyone. Love seeing all the chat. Thank you.
Yes. And then Katie, you'll share these your slides with us afterwards, right? So
Yes,
everybody
yes.
will have those
I'll make a
slides.
PDF and send you the slides right after.
Yeah, and then I'll also send out the recording probably tomorrow. I'll send out the recording. So right now, let me share my screen and continue with so thank you, Katie, for your great presentation. And right now we're at a Q&A session. So the benefit of being live is that we're able to interact with the speaker. So if anybody has a question, you can either unmute yourself and speak the question, or if you're shy, you can type in the chat box and we'll read it out for you, for everybody.
Yeah. And I love to see people's faces.
Yeah, you can put your face on now too. Sean, do you have anything you've been listening in the whole conversation. Do you have anything to start off, Sean?
Thanks for asking. Yep, the first thing I have to say is thank you, Katie. Once again, a lot of the leadership stuff that you talk about are things that I try to inculcate and learn and do myself. As always, start on me first and try and figure out the rest later. There's so much actually contained within what you said that it's a hard place to start. I guess one of the best places to start, because I came out of the construction side as a superintendent many years ago, and asking questions is not the natural route for a superintendent. Telling people what to do is the natural route for a superintendent, and rarely asking what your input is, how, or let alone how do you think you ought to do it, because everybody knows the superintendents. There's a right way, a wrong way, and then there's my way, and around here we do stuff my way. So would you give us some advice, please, on how to cultivate our minds and ourselves to define better questions and tell us a bit about how to cultivate better questions and point out some of the differences? I thought your comment about couching a command within a question is very revealing, and many people do that too. But I'd love to hear your advice on how do we transform ourselves from speakers to good question askers?
Yeah, that's great question, and like the crux of what my upcoming workshop is going to be. But I'm happy to share some other things that I've learned just here. But really, to me, the number one is well, I guess there's some multiple parts. First, creating awareness that, is this about, are you needing to be the expert in this moment? Are you trying to also cultivate expertise in other people? And it does come down to like creating a culture of trust and relationship as well. So when you're working with people, it's first even creating awareness of what the outcome or the impact of how they're showing up right now. So some of what I do with leadership teams or other is to I don't know, kind of help hold up the mirror and really define like or even defining like what kind of organization or team do they want?
I'm trying to smoke some cigarette. You missing it, good?
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Sorry. So, someone's having a good cigarette, so that's good. But trying to start painting the picture for someone about what impact are they having. Sometimes it feels easier, or we're habituated that we need to show up with the answer. So like, and also when things are so fast moving, we fall back on that, excuse me, on that habit, because it feels like a crisis, and it's easier to just like give, like, I need to be directive. We got so much going on. It's just so much easier. But really, not everything is a crisis that has to be fixed now. So helping people start to see where are those small moments that they might be able to ask some more questions, and starting with like maybe one area to start practicing that, or starting to see like, people often feel very overwhelmed by how much work they have, but that's been a self-created situation, right? Because when you show up giving everyone all the answers, you create an organization where there's people are disengaged because they're not being asked their own input, and you're creating this learned helplessness. So everyone comes to you for the answers. And so it's, I guess, helping people see the impact of their behavior and then starting to practice in different ways. And And some of it just starts with awareness building. So I know that's just a really complex situation, but I would say break it down and starting to create that awareness and help someone see the impact of their actions.
Thank you. That's all very helpful to me.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have one question from John. John asks, how is this different than a broader interpretation of practicing the coaching kata?
It isn't. So the coaching, the Toyota Kata, the coaching and the improvement kata is a framework that Mike Rother developed after going in and studying Toyota. Toyota does not practice the coaching kata as defined by Mike Rother. Mr. Yoshino's comment highlights how fundamental and linked they are, that this mindset is just ingrained in them. I set the direction, I provide support by asking questions, I come back and I'm developing myself at the same time. So this is how Mr. Yoshino shows up is the way that when Mike Rother went into Toyota to observe what leaders were doing, he then created this construct to help us learn and practice it. So it's the same fundamentals, because that's what Mike Rother was observing when he created the Toyota Kata as a framework to help us practice it.
Katie, do you think that forgive me, I'm just going to jump in with a question relative to this. Do you think that, I forget whose book it was in, it's something like the 20 Million Questions book. It's kind of hard to find. Hal Maycomber turned me onto it some time ago, but it's a commentary about the fact that in Japanese culture, we all have the suggestion box that sits in the office, put in a suggestion, and it's well known that Americans basically don't use the box because they don't think their questions are going to be answered. Whereas there's some commentary on the underlying culture of the fact that Toyota, and whether this is cultivated by the turn your organization into a learning organization thinking that is kind of deeply embedded in Toyota, or whether it's a Japanese cultural issue or not. But I read up on this a little bit, and it's kind of like Toyota has that policy of put in suggestions, but they solicit something like millions of suggestions, and they have something like 40 million suggestions over the last X number of years, a majority of which, well over 50%, sometimes a much higher percentage, are actually implemented. So learning how to ask questions instead of making statements, would you speak briefly on that as a cultural issue, and how do we instill in American individualism and all the concepts and some of the differences in the cultural thinking between the American think and the Japanese think? Like, anything you have to comment on that, I think would be insightful for me. Am I being clear? Is my question clear?
Well, I think there are like a few different elements to
exactly.
question. So let me first I'll address the part on the suggestion system. So I had one of the amazing opportunities, both when I was living in Japan and now with I lead study trips in non-pandemic times for leaders and continuous improvement people around the world that come learn and have experiences in Japan. I've gone to many companies. So first is that Japanese culture and Toyota culture are not synonymous. There are definitely some things that were enablers from Japanese culture that show up in the Toyota way. And then there are some things that, like what Toyota does, is actually what I consider a countermeasure to some maybe more limiting cultural ways of being that come from a Japanese way. And so the principles kind of challenge all of us, no matter where we're from. But what I found is there are a lot of Japanese companies that have these suggestion systems, and like have thousands, of the small companies, thousands that are implemented, because it's about these little micro ideas. And so it doesn't have to be something big. It's about that, like, what's the small thing that we can do to fix, this, like, putting tennis balls on the bottom of the chairs so they're not scratching. I go to another organization. They wanted everyone to see how neat and tidy, Japanese are very into precision. So they had this idea that everyone would line up the back of their car at at a certain level. And so everything looks like in neat rows. Great. But that shows how the pride that they take in their work. And, it's amazing. So all of those little suggestion systems, and not poo-pooing something as small or insignificant. So I think that that's important. However, like, the Japanese way of doing business is not like, I talk to, many people who work for large Japanese companies, and it is a really top-down command and control, wait for the leader to tell me exactly what to do, not super engaged. But what Toyota and some other companies have been able to do is flip that hierarchy, like leverage the hierarchy, because Japan is a very hierarchical society, but really enable it that the leaders are there, your one up is there to help enable and support you. Now I've talked so much, I forgot the second part of your question. So Sean, can you remind me what the other part was?
Once you started talking, my head starts taking off in about 47 different directions. Let me see if I can go back to what that original was, kind of like how in American society, which is so individualistic. And I got to tell you that if we were to put out the suggestion that everybody in the parking lot should line their cars up a certain way so that we create a straight line, in an American system, people are going to park sideways, like intentionally, 100%, because they're going to make a statement. I'm an individual. And that's, just because, so I mean, there's cultural things, but how can we induce, beside the idea of making it a safe environment, in a sense, there's a parallel between what you're saying and like the concept of the last planner system. The person closest to the work usually has the best suggestion about what to make as an improvement, right? So this kind of tangentially ties into the concept of empowerment. And so how do we create a culture of more, so that the person who thinks they're the least significant in the line often has one of the more important things to say. So how do we cultivate this so that they feel, whether it's psychological safety or any of the other things, how do we help change the American concept of being a better contributor to the system and not fearing the fact that someone in the room is going to crack up and laugh at you, or your boss is going to tell you, that's the stupidest idea I ever heard. And so, right. So, I mean, can you comment on that a little bit?
Yeah.
And I think that was, I think that's kind of where the second half of my question was going. I hope, Duana, tell me if I'm too far off.
So, there's no easy answer to that. And again, these principles challenge all of us, no matter, to grow. But really, it ultimately starts off with the leadership of it's like parents setting the way, the way. And if the senior leaders of an organization are acting that way, then it's going to ripple down all the way. We each, though, have an opportunity to influence the people that we work with. So this is not to say that, oh, you just have to wait for the senior leaders. You, on team that you have, you can show up starting to ask more questions or model the way. But again, a toxic work environment's not, not good either, but it's about taking those moments to start asking some more questions, modeling what you want to see, especially if you have an actual position of some management responsibility or authority. But certainly we can even influence team dynamics by calling things out and holding that up. And again, it goes back to some of my early comments, how to make visible for leaders the impact that, like, what kind of organization, what kind of outcomes if they're more focused on the business outcomes, okay, what business outcomes do we need? Then how are we going to achieve that given the current environment and the current culture? How are we going to engage other people? And then what, looking at themselves as well. I know that's not an easy answer, but it's about creating awareness about how we're showing up and the impact that that's having. Yeah.
No, and I didn't ask an easy question, so I wasn't expecting an easy answer. What are your thoughts relative to Brene Brown's concept of dare to lead and that type of daring, the concept of daring, and the prohibitions that some American culture has about daring?
Yeah, I mean, I think we all have to think about how we can be more daring and be authentic and show up to be the, some environments are more safe to be able to do that, but it's about connecting with our purpose. And if we're in an organization that is really terrible, not all of us have the ability to, financially necessarily be able to leave, but, many people do have a choice of where you're going to work. So yeah, it's about daring to show up in your authentic way and challenging when people are not, not being good humans. So
that leads me to another question. I do not mean to, I don't hear anybody else piping up. So
yeah.
how do we find our purpose? How do we as individuals find our purpose? Like, what's your recommendations? What are your personal recommendations about what we should do if we can't find our purpose or feel not intuitively linked to it? What do we do?
Yeah, I say start with drawing. Start drawing the things that are important to you. Purpose doesn't have to be this, like, not everyone's purpose has to be this global, like, big purpose. And it's taken me a while to come and be able to articulate sort of what mine is. What are the things that are important to you? Draw some pictures, start to connect with your heart, and release from the words. Like, what gives you joy? What brings you meaning? What do you care about? What's important in your heart? And then just iterate and sit with that. And but it's about looking inward. And it can be like, my purpose is to, like, care for the people in my life. And that's an amazing purpose, like, it can be so many different things. Yeah. But I also suggest starting with drawing, because it can release us from, like, perfection of words.
I actually love that idea of starting with drawings. I had another longtime teacher who said, from an old psychologist's point of view, just take down a piece of paper and put a word on it, like intent, and then let free thought rise from that, and just write down every word that comes to mind over the next 5 minutes as you're doing it, or write down the word purpose, and then just let the mind freely associate. And sometimes you'll come up with things that seem contrary and weird and whatever, but you have to do it without judgment, without pre-assumption, and then filter through them, because there's always clues and keys from our own subconsciousness. But I love the idea of drawing. I think it's a great suggestion. Thank you.
Yeah, great. I'd love to hear from some other people too. Thanks for your comments and questions, Sean. Also, I was wondering if we could take the slide off so that we can see more people's faces. I find that's more connecting in terms of having a conversation rather than just seeing a slide. Yeah, well,
now we see you.
Does this work? Does this work? Okay, so basically I just turned off the Q&A. That's a good idea. Okay, next time we'll do that. Okay. Great. Anyone have more questions? Let me see. Questions. I see here. Thanks, Sean. That was a good drawing. Yeah, come on. Feel free to just unmute yourself and ask the question.
I make comments. I'm not the one with all the answers, so I can ask you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was literally filling space. So do you know the who's the commentator from Oklahoma, radio personality from the 30s, 40s, 50s, social satirist, social commentator? His name will come to mind. Anyway, he had a beautiful quote: "Everyone is equally ignorant just about different things." And so, it's a beautiful line. But come on, everybody, there's a lot of people here sitting and listening. I know there's questions out there. I would love to hear other aspects and takes on everything that Ms. Anderson is saying.
Steve, I see Steve Turner here. Steve, are you there? Let me unmute you, see if you have anything to add. Okay, so we have a question from Margaret. Oh, did Steve unmute?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Steve. Hey.
So, Katie, I've kind of been going back and forth, reading over the notes that I had. In the construction business, and this is probably just a very basic, very grassroots, but as a superintendent, it's oftentimes our job to solve a problem. And being schedule driven, somebody's going to come and say, what do you want me to do about this? And they want an answer right then, because they're on a schedule. They know I'm on a schedule. And so the tendency really is, let me just solve this problem. We get back on schedule and we get on down the road. I understand the value of questioning that their concern or their issue or their question or whatever that is. How does Toyota, from a production standpoint, deal with that as it might relate to, say, a construction type schedule? A production line is about throughput.
Yeah.
It's widget in, widget out, or raw material in or widget out. And if we don't produce X number today, then we're behind the 8 ball. We're behind schedule. So
yeah. Yeah. So I can speak just from I've been to Toyota factories like 10 times, or it's a beauty watching. It's like a ballet. And part of that is this structure that they have created. And okay, I'm not a, I've never worked at Toyota, so I can't speak from actually being there. I speak from observation and from my deep experience with Mr. Yoshino and a few other Toyota leaders. But it's amazing. So they have the line actually moves, so they're keeping to their tack time. Like, they have a lot of visual signals. Are we on track or are we off track? And they've set up the management structure to really be able to support leaders in different leadership roles to be coaches and support structures. So there's the team leader who actually is, a recent frontline worker who's there managing just the team and floating and popping in to help. So they pull what's called the the cord, or now it's a button that signals, I need help. I'm not going to be able to complete my 60-second task in time. And then the team leader comes in and, maybe asks a question or just jumps in to help them out. Then later they'll do some problem solving of what happened. Did the person need more training? Were they missing a bolt? Whatever it was. If the team leader is not able to help solve that problem, then they call the group leader who's like managing maybe a team of 4 or 5, and they jump in, and that's where the escalation goes. It's only, at a certain point, then they actually have to stop the line, which is very actually they do stop the line a lot, but you see the on button, you're there like at the, walking along the cat track above the factory, those buttons are going off all the time. People are signaling, I need help, and someone's coming in to help them immediately. And so that's one way that they have really figured out how to not have it impact the end of production. So problems are made immediately visible and help is come in, and then they do some problem solving if they're seeing the same thing happen over and over again. Working in healthcare, there is that same sense of urgency and crisisness. That's not a word, crisisness. Crisis, like we got to get things fixed. The patients are coming in, things are busy. We need to stay on schedule. We need to discharge patients because other patients are coming in. And it creates this like kind of self-fulfilling prophecy of like urgency at all times. So it's one of the things especially when I was working in healthcare, it was like, what are those small micro moments where you can like be like, okay, this thing doesn't have to be fixed in this exact second. How can I say like, well, what's one thought you have about that? Or like, let's come back in an hour and like share some ideas, like creating those small moments so we're still moving things forward. And it's not just, oh, what do you think? And, like you may not have time there, but as you're starting to learn and create micro times for learning, that is where it's going to start to build, creating more problem solving capability and start freeing up more capacity for problem solving as well. So it's sort of taking that pause and like, does this actually have to be fixed in this exact second? Or can we give a little bit of time, and how much time to do a little bit more thinking and allowing people to come back with that. So that's my 2 cents.
So
Sure.
Katie, I don't know if you guys can hear me or not, Katie, but this is Daryl McNeil. So Steve, great comment. And I think, Katie, you expanded on a little bit in a factory environment, but during my time in construction, what I found to be the biggest problem area is that we were very good, like you said, Steve, at fixing the immediate problem and getting work back on schedule and things like that. What we failed to do is circle back and do what I'm going to call a root cause analysis, or determine what caused that problem to happen. And so we're preventing that action from happening again. And a lot of that is team involvement, right from the guys who are installing to the guys that are delivering product to the construction site, the entire supply chain operations and all that kind of stuff. So the thing that I found in construction is they never took the time to develop that root cause analytical type strategic thinking to prevent the reoccurrence of an event. Yeah. Okay, you're absolutely right. They just steam ahead and they just keep going, and we got to get this project done on time. And the Lean Construction Institute has been very good at just promoting that kind of root cause, deep thinking type analytics when it comes to construction sites. But some places are very good, but others are not. So that's just my thoughts.
Yeah, great great. Thank you, Daryl. I mean, I see that across industries as well. It's like we're moving so fast, we don't come back. Those times where we have to fix it now. Like, how are we circling back? So like going back to that comment I made about making the invisible visible, we kind of lose track of one way I've done this in other organizations of like helping a team just even create a simple tally sheet of like, what are the different problems that are happening throughout the day? And are we starting to see a trend? And then like coming back and doing, and that's the responsibility of then the leader to create that structure to come back and say, okay, we're seeing a pattern here, and creating those opportunities for learning. So that's where the leadership and the management role comes in, of like making sure we are circling back. And then how are we engaging the team to both make problems visible and then do some like basic problem solving around it? And
Right.
that's
and only do small fixes at a time, things that aren't
yeah,
things that are not going to have huge impact on the operations. Just these small little incremental changes that are going to show the workers that by engaging in the process, you're going to see success. And once you see that success, Steve, you'll turn the entire operation around. It'll just start to happen. You'll be amazed at the amount of engagement and corrective action you'll see once you get the support of the workers. It's incredible how Toyota has created a mindset to drive that top-down mentality, but from the floor all the way back to leadership in terms of that communication mechanism. It's really good.
Yeah, thanks, Daryl. And Bill put in a comment here and about how construction is not a partnership. It's multiple companies working together, and yeah, that's a big challenge to overcome. I've talked to Margaret and others about this being a real challenge in construction industry. However, so I came from healthcare. That was I've worked across industries, but my biggest direct experience, same thing there. Like the doctors are not employed by the hospital, and they're not like, there's administrative staff and there's the nursing staff, and then the doctors are totally separate. And it's like, how do you get alignment of these people kind of coming in, all working together, but very siloed and often not even a lot, actually working for different companies. Again, it's finding that alignment around what are we here to serve? What are we here to do? And creating alignment around what our shared goal and purpose is. So, and that's really in healthcare, that was around what does the patient need? And then how are we going to work together to achieve that? And that can help break down barriers. So I'm not saying that there's an easy answer to that, but it's like, how do you create that shared understanding, even as it fits through like teamwork through influence and, in indirect partnerships. But I know that's a huge challenge for you guys.
Yeah, for the past couple of years, every other week, we have what we call a lean meeting. We've been doing it now, almost 2 years. So for a couple of hours every other week, we take the time to bring all the superintendents and the management staff of the company in, and we do review we circle back on a lot of these areas and try to take some of the root causes for some of the things that we've encountered, dig deep into those, and try to figure out through a PDCA type process what we can do to make it a little bit better and how we can change it. But I'll say this as delicately as I can, for some of the older, more seasoned veterans, those changes come so hard. And the tendency is literally just to make that 180 turn, fix it, and go on down the road. And a very good example is we tried to go through an A3 process several months back, and it was something very simple. It was we had some window openings where we had storefront and glass that was going to be delayed. What's the best way to take care of those cased openings? Do we go ahead and sheetrock it and then block it somehow to keep the weather out, or do we not sheetrock it because this architect wants it a certain way or that architect wants it a different way? So as we were starting the A3, a couple of the older superintendents piped up and said, well, here's exactly what you need to do. This is what we do on all of our jobs. It's not a problem at all. So let's get on down the road. So it's, it's that cultural change that we fight every single day. And we do a pretty good job with our lean culture here. We really do. We've got some really great processes. We're further along than some of our competitors. We're, for all intents and purposes, a paper-free organization. We don't have paper plans, paper schedules. Everything we do is digital. But from a problem-solving standpoint, it's that 180 pivot, and let's just solve it right now so we can stay on schedule and get on down the road. That's probably one of the biggest issues we fight on a daily basis.
Yeah,
So.
I just put in a a link to my latest blog post and video where I was talking about the same thing, like we start with solutions and we're like, I've seen that before. Here let's starting with that opposed to understanding what's actually happening here. And this happens especially when you have developed years of experience with something. So it's natural. We have accumulated knowledge, and it's very possible that our knowledge from the past may be helpful for our current situation. One, and this, for people who have deep expertise or have developed, a lot of experience. So one way that I help people or challenge them is actually this one leader that I worked with, she found a way that was helpful for her. She said, it was a nurse leader. Well, I have deep experience and a lot, deep knowledge. I have a lot of experience in very similar situations. I don't know what is exactly happening in this situation. So why don't you tell me? So that's from a leadership perspective. Then in working with that team, I'd say it's great when let's get to our ideas for how we might fix this. Let's generate all the ideas from your past experience. Let's get all of that out here. Okay, now let's understand what the problem is in this situation. So what should be happening, what's actually happening here in this situation. Then we'll understand that problem. Let's see if some of these ideas from the past might help us be countermeasures or fix the problem or experiments that we could try. So acknowledging the expertise, making that visible, and then going back to what's the problem here, and then how we can maybe connect those two would be something that might.
Steve, just a quick question. How does the feedback from the guys in the field roll up to the supervisors as part of that, analytical meeting that you have? Is there feedback coming up, or is the problem just identified by the supervisory team, and then the leadership team talks about the corrective action? I'm not seeing a connection between the field operators and the leadership team.
Yeah, a lot of times that's exactly the case. There is a disconnect right there. And so that's what we try to do with these meetings every couple of weeks. In addition to some other things that we talk about, we try to drill down and we go back over some of the issues that have been created over that 2-week period of time on the individual job sites. And those issues are logged through our system is Autodesk. It's BIM 360, where we keep track of everything. So it's very easy to call those up and look at them. And then we start trying to peel back those layers and uncover some of that information and drill down. And I can tell you, there have been a lot of days where we have gone through 5 whys to try to get to the actual root cause of the problem and try to make a determination there. And a lot of times what we're finding out from a solution standpoint is the superintendent is jumping in with a solution too quick to what the problem really is. We may put the Band-Aid on it for the day, but it's frustrating because 3 days later, it'll surface as another issue on another job site. And I'm shaking my head thinking, what the heck? We just discussed this 3 days ago. Do you think it would help, Steve, to invite one of those field operators to one of your meetings? And give him a scope or expand his thought process in terms of how do you guys articulate the problem? How do you resolve the problem? How can they, as field operators, present problems in a better or a different way to help you guys resolve it maybe in a different manner, same manner? It doesn't really matter. It's just
It's just getting those field operators engaged in the corrective action process. Because like you said, if it's a top-down supervisor, this is the way we're going to do it. And then 2 days later, the whole leadership team or the process loses credibility.
That's right.
Because the field operators see no impact. They
That's
just
right.
simply see the same thing happening over and over and over again. So their reluctance to engage in the process is going to be less engaging, I guess, is what I want to say.
Yeah.
So I've been talking too much. I'll keep
No,
quiet.
no. I mean, you bring up a very good point, and we try to address those in our daily huddle meetings, and with those daily huddles every day. But there's only a limited amount of time in that daily huddle, and my thought is, if you're addressing a question for a particular foreman, the entire team needs to be involved, because that same issue may come up, or something similar to it may come up somewhere down the line, and other people may benefit from that entire conversation, the uncovering of the issue. How do we take care of it so it doesn't happen again? What's the best? And somebody else may have a better answer all the way down the line as well. So
Correct.
we don't do enough of that. We probably should do more. No question about it, Daryl. I appreciate that.
That's actually a great point, Steve, because again, as part of our process at the factory is we have our daily flip chart reviews, which talks about other problems that other departments may have had, and this is how we resolve them. And and things like that. So not only do we have the team leads talking about the success of what they've done, they've also talked about the problems and how they corrected it. So that communication is, I have forever going back and forth on problems and resolutions. And you're 100% right on. There's a lot of smart people out there, and there's a lot of good people that have great ways of solving problems and getting, not that you want a 2-hour meeting. You want these meetings to, like, I've been at Toyota plants where, they'll resolve a problem in 15 minutes sort of thing. It's exactly like Kate said, they have that leadership structure. So the minute the problem is identified, boom, they never shut the line down. The whole goal is to fix the problem, but in a sustainable way, so it doesn't happen again. So yeah, great conversation. Cool.
Thank you very much for letting me jump in there.
Thank you, Steve. Great insight. So yeah, I think I'm seeing some questions here from Ray. Ray, you typed in the question. Will you be willing to ask it live? Ray Diaz.
Sure. Let me see.
Go ahead, Ray.
Yes, trying to find myself here. Hold on just 1 minute. Can you see me now?
Yes. Yep.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Sure. I have glanced at your book a couple of times. Haven't gotten, the time to go from head to tail. And after going through some of the actions that I have seen in it, and seeing you post, one of the biggest questions that I have is, okay, how would you define leadership in a way that applies to everything that you let me put it this way, in a way that I can explain it to a child or somebody who hasn't started to to get into a position that requires that. I mean, I have read many definitions, but I would like to hear you based on the context of the framework that you have created.
Yeah. So thanks, Ray. And there are many definitions of leadership, but I don't think a leader is not dependent on a title. You could be a manager without being a leader, and you can be a leader without having direct, supervisory responsibility for people. But a leader is someone who helps, orient people towards a direction and helps, bring them forward with them. So, you're really truly leading people. You're someone that people want to follow. You're having clarity of where we need to go. And then you're making sure that people aren't falling behind. And so you're really supporting them. So it does get back to that same definition I had. It's about setting that direction and then providing the support so people can follow along, and about, inspiring and supporting and engaging, but also making sure we're aligned and moving forward.
Thank you. I mean, I see a lot of, how should I say, great relationship between what you are, what you have written in the book and all the lessons that you have posted everywhere, and the parent role to some extent. It's like you see parallelism between the father or parent, sorry, figure and the role of our leadership. Is that a correct way of looking at it? I mean, I see a lot of empathy in everything that you write about the leadership framework.
Thank you so much. I'm really glad it's you're enjoying the book and took some things from today. So thank you. I actually have to leave in 2 minutes because my son is having a report out for his school at the top of the hour. So I really want to thank you all for showing up today. It's a great group, and for the participation and the questions. Again, please reach out to me. And, again, I'm just putting up my contact information here, LinkedIn and on Twitter. Love you to join the coaching workshop that I'm doing soon, or just reach out and stay connected. So thank you again for being here today. And thank you to the Lean Construction blog for inviting me.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you, everybody. And we hope to see you guys again in the next webinar. We'll send out the recording later on with the presentation slides. Okay, goodbye, everybody.
Take care. Bye.